$1.5 trillion health care overhaul that less than 36% of the American people want. You got that one going for you. Obama, along with the House and Senate Democrats, are forcing this down the throat of Americans. They say it'll only cost us $1 trillion because, get this thinking, it will save us money by making cuts to Medicare. Yet, at the same time, they're expanding Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare is a program with $74 trillion in liabilities already. Again, the idea: get as many people on government assistance as possible. Does that sound like that's what's possibly going on here today in America? This latest class of progressives have taken the Cloward-Piven strategy to a whole new level. TARP money. People who didn't even deserve it. I mean, if you're a bank and you can't figure out that the guy who works at the car wash, can't afford a $2 million house, you don't deserve to be a bank. But Barney Frank and his friends threatened the banks. They said, if you don't give out these risky loans to people who can't afford them, well, then you're going to have us to deal with. Even the guy who signed off on TARP, a progressive himself, George Bush, warned that tighter restrictions and regulations were needed for Fannie and Freddie. Here's a progressive saying Fannie and Freddie is in trouble. He didn't warn once. He didn't warn twice. He warned 17 times. The stimulus package, millions of dollars, going to fund non-existent projects in districts that don't even exist. We'll get into that later. Well, now Frank and Dodd, they learned the Cloward-Piven lesson in the 70s. You got to be in the system to be able to really collapse it. Oh, and they are certainly part of it. Now, I suppose there are people that mainly are funded by George Soros that will get on their blogs and say this is nothing but a conspiratorial nonsense. Well, again, let me just show you Rudy Giuliani saying it back in 1998, long before I had ever heard of Cloward and Piven.
This wasn't an accident. It wasn't an atmospheric thing. It wasn't supernatural. It was the result of policies, choices, and a philosophy that was embraced in the 1960s and then enthusiastically endorsed in the city of New York.
Okay. After a nation of Americans that were tired of able-bodied welfare recipients taking money from hard-working taxpayers, Cloward and Piven decided they were going to turn their methods to something else. Oh, they were going to overwhelm the system, all right. Wait until you hear this. They decided to get into voter registration. They started a group like Human Serve. They worked with another group, Project Vote. Gosh, that's tied to Acorn. Isn't that also a group tied to President Obama? John Fund reports that Barney Frank and Chuck Schumer now are about to introduce, hold yourself, universal voter registration. What this is if you're on any federal roll at all, you're automatically a voter. You're receiving welfare, food stamps, if you're a homeowner or you're unemployed, you are automatically a voter. We'll talk about that more later this week when we get into structure, what they're collapsing us into. But make sure you ponder that for the next couple of days. If Acorn can automatically register everyone, well, maybe that just explains why members of Congress don't care about their poll numbers, why they don't listen to you anymore. This is the same Acorn that has already been indicted for voter fraud all over the country. Cloward and Piven lobbied heavily for the motor voter law, which is widely blamed for getting so much dead wood fraud onto our voter rolls. Invalid registrations, signed by dead people, ineligible and non-existent. They're voting because of this bill, signed in 1993 by Bill Clinton. When he signed this bill into law, guess who was there? Watch carefully. We're about to approach. Oh, boy. Okay, we see. Wait a minute. Who's that lady? Do I recognize that lady? I recognize her. Oh, and who's standing next? Cloward and Piven. Richard Cloward and his wife, Frances Fox Piven. Currently an honorary chair of the Democratic Socialists of America. It is hard to get your arms around this. It is hard to believe that our country has people in it that would want to fundamentally transform it into something else. But believe you me, just because you or I had never heard of this pair, this dynamic duo until recently, don't you think for a minute that they haven't been heroes to the left for years. Bill Clinton knew exactly who they were back in 1993, no doubt back in 1965. You may not have heard of Cloward and Piven, just like you may not have heard of Saul Alinsky until recently. But let me give you a couple pieces of information here. This is Hillary Clinton's thesis. This is from her thesis in college. The name of it is "There is Only the Fight, an analysis of the Alinsky model." You may not have heard of these people. You may have just assumed that all Americans, when you did hear about them, would feel the same way about them as you do, repulsed. But you would be wrong. In fact, let me give you the evidence I gave you last night. Here is a statement made just 2 days before Christmas from Chris Matthews to show us that no, we are not all on the same page.
Back to one of our heroes from the past, from the 60s, Saul Alinsky.
Back to one of our heroes, Saul Alinsky. So, we go back to the board. We have the progressive movement. We see their transformation and the things that they learned. We have spending to collapse, the spending bill done by Apollo. We have Acorn. We have TARP, now unlimited amount in TARP. We have universal Obamacare, expanding Medicaid, which is already in the hole, $74 billion. We have state bribes, record number on unemployment since 1983. And here's a great one, a record number on government assistance as the sole source of income. This is a record number in all of history of America. I got news for you. On overloading the system on purpose to bring about what I would call systematic failure and catastrophic collapse, but what they would call fundamental transformation of America. America, I got news for you. Case closed. But we have more. The stimulus package, proposed to save the economy and create jobs. Really? The evidence that that's not really happening. Next. I'm trying to lay everything out for you that we covered last week and show you the facts as we know them. Because there's a lot of disinformation, a lot of smear tactics about me and this program and about what we talk about every night. If I'm wrong, they can call that phone at any time. The White House has the phone number. It is imperative, though, that you see the case closed from last year because we've got to move on. We're not going to be arguing these things anymore. And if you watch all this week, you will see this is true. This is true. All right, so we just gave you the basics of Cloward and Piven. Well, maybe you can find some other rational explanation for what's going on. I can't. If the White House would like to explain it and explain how they feel about Cloward and Piven and all of this stuff, they can call us, and I will gladly put them on the air. I can't make sense of anything the Obama administration and Congress is trying to do right now without including Cloward and Piven. Well, the stimulus package, here's one. It was supposed to save the economy, right? In fact, we were told if it's not passed immediately, the United States may never recover. After the fear-mongering was over and the objections of the vast majority of Americans, they just went ahead and passed it. $787 billion. Well, since then, we have lost over 4 million jobs in 2009. The administration claims, however, at recovery.gov, that they saved or created more than 640,000 jobs. I don't really know how that works. By the way, that amounts to spending more than $240,000 per job. Wow. Total compensation earned by the average employee in October was $60,000. If we would have just spent the stimulus money, we could have used that stimulus money to pay for a year's worth of labor. We could have created 2.6 million jobs, and everybody would have worked for a whole year. But that wouldn't make sense, would it? No, that's why they did it this way. Let me give you a few examples of how they've done this inexplicable disaster. A Georgia community college, they reported creating 280 jobs with $200,000, $240,000, I believe, of recovery money. In reality, they report no jobs were created. Florida Healthcare Center said it's $98,669 worth of stimulus money saved 129 jobs. Actually, they just gave everybody a raise. Your tax dollars gave 129 people a raise. How about this? The federal government said they created 4,231 jobs that were created with, I like this one, $28.3 million. That one really didn't work out so well. These people were actually employed for 5 weeks.